Good morning, it's FIDE Master John Curtis, and today I'm looking at the World Cup. I'm giving you the latest game between Magnus Carlsen, black, against Grandmaster Fedoseev. He's 2,700, and of course Carlsen's 2847. And we're talking about this is the semi-final of the World Cup, and Carlsen has come back. He's come back after losing his other game. He is now back. And let's see how he plays a masterpiece. A positional masterpiece in the King's Indian. Okay, so Vladimir plays d4, knight f6, c4 is played, g6, the mark of the King's Indian, or Perk, h4. All the grandmasters are playing h4. What does Carlsen do? Does he send h4 back into the old books of chess history? What does the world champion do? Come on, let's have a look. Well, he plays bishop g7. He ignores it. He says, right, I'm gonna try to disprove that h4 is good. If you want to push h5, go ahead, I'll take the pawn off and I'll win the game. That's what he's saying. So knight c3 is played. And Carlsen says, well, d6, well, you're not going to play h5. You're never going to play it. And now e4 is played, okay? So he tries to take the centre, and he says, well, maybe I'll get a chance to play maybe bishop e2 and h5. All right, so knight c6 is played. He's challenging the black squares in the centre of the board, right? The bishop on g7 and the knight are indirectly attacking the pawn on d4. And now d5 is played, right? Going for space, a spatial advantage. So Vladimir wants to overrun Carlsen. Well, it's not so easy to overrun a world champion, so the world champion moves forwards, and he says, I like that knight to g4 square. So I've got lots of pieces that can do operations on that square. So do your best, Vladimir, do your best. So he plays bishop e2. Now that bishop e2 may prepare h5. So what does Carlsen do? He stops it. He says, right, well, he said, you've prepared your h4 move to play h5. He says, but the difference is in the position that I've got all these knights and that I can swing around here and maybe get an attack. So you better be careful what you're doing, buddy. Anyway, so he plays bishop f4, right? So he didn't want to put the pawn there because the knight had come in on g4, and you'd never ever move Carlsen's knight. Well, I wouldn't advise doing that. But by the same token, what are you actually threatening? What are you threatening? Apart from maybe bishop takes knight. What else would you be threatening by playing bishop to f4? You'd be preparing queen to d2 and maybe castling, but the king side seems stagnant, right? So is the king side being stagnant part of the ramifications of playing h4 as white? If that's the case, then h4 is no good. Let's see what took place. So black castles with impunity because there is no g4, there's no h5. So what on earth is white going to do? Well, he chose not to take the knight on e4. He chose to develop his pieces. So if Carlsen simply plays knight takes knight, well then the position looks pretty even. And he does. He takes it off, and now the pawn takes. Well, in my estimation, this is a bad move. So if white was to lose this game, he would lose this game because he destroyed his pawn structure on the king side. That's my assessment here. Right, remember this. If white was to lose this game, it was because he destroyed his own pawn structure on the king side. So c6 is played. Immediately the central pawn structure comes under attack. Queen to d2. Dudo realises that he must try to eliminate the black squared bishop. the black squared bishop can cause all sorts of problems. So Carlsen takes the centre pawn. He says, I'm intent on destroying your centre because you've weakened your king side. He recaptures with space. If white's allowed here to do what he wants to do, just change bishops and play f4, e5, well, white will overrun black. So this is a position, this is a critical position where black must use utmost care. So he plays king h7. He stops bishop h6, the exchange, right? So now you can't play there because you're going to simply lose your bishop, okay? This is the super critical position. So when I was watching this last night, Grandmaster Noroditsky mentioned that this is the super critical position. What on earth does Carlsen do from here? What does a world champion do? What is his plan? He's going to have a plan, a super plan to fight back on the black squares. Okay, he's secured his black squares with king h7, but it's still a bit wonky, and white can still play bishop e3, f4, and maybe f5. And it's going to be a real challenge. Okay, so white plays a4. Well, I don't think a4 has got any place in this position. It looks like it's an interesting move. I think Grandmaster Hess or one of the other players there that were commentating on the game was saying this is brilliant with the idea of rook a3, the rook lift, right? The idea of rook here and rook across here to defend the king side. Maybe even they were suggesting to move the rook to g3 if the f-pawn recaptures at some stage, and maybe there's a doubling of rooks and power down the g-file. Well, that's very, very possible if your opponent plays into your hands, but the world champion's not about to do that. Not Magnus Carlsen. Okay, so here we go. Knight d7. He's redirecting his pieces. The timing here is super critical because all Carlsen's pieces are almost on the back rank, right? But they're reconfiguring, right? They're reconfiguring and coordinating together. And I always talk about the coordination of your pieces, right? Okay, and purpose. You've got to play with purpose. And that's what Carlsen's playing with. He's playing with purpose. He wants those black squares to be deadly. a4. Again, I think white's lost for a plan. I really believe that this bishop on f4 is misplaced, right? And it was imperative that white remove the bishop to back to e3, and if anything, play bishop to d4 or f4, and maybe even sacrifice on e5. But they had to do something, right? They had to do something, not a4, a5. It's too slow. He's just assuming. I think Vladimir is assuming that Magnus is going to just sit there and die slowly like a rat in the corner with the old rat sack poison. But not Magnus Carlsen. Bang, f5. He says, right, you got a few problems to solve, buddy. Well, white anticipated. To be fair, white anticipated the attack on the f-file, right, with the knight coming to e5 and the pressure of the rook and the knight on the f3 square. So hence, that's why he played rook a3. But he's defending rather than attacking. He's defending the attack, right? You can't defend against the world champion. He didn't take an attacking stance. And he's going to pay the penalty. He will. We'll see what takes place. But he's going to pay the penalty. The penalty is the loss of being able to win the World Cup. Right. So, and he wasn't in a position to do it if he played attacking chess rather than his plan of just sitting there playing spatial chess and saying, I'll be all right, Jack. You know, I'll just sit back here. I'll grab the space and space control will win the game. He's forgot about the tactics, I should think. Anyway, here comes the tactics. f4. A blast from the past. So bishop takes pawn. He takes it off. I'll tell you what. It could be a biggest mistake of his life. You know what I would play in this move? I would play bishop to d4. I think bishop d4 looks better. He's taking the pawn. He's playing, okay, he played rook a3 to hold the f pawn. And his plan is to just, well, if you want to give me the exchange, I'll take it and I'll win. Admittedly, if he goes bishop there, Magnus can just play knight d7, change off the bishops, whack his knight back there on e5 and say, right, you'll never get in, buddy. I'm controlling the black squares. So, like I always say, it's a fight between the black squares and the white squares. But fundamentally, what did white do? Well, he played g takes f3 instead of bishop takes f3 in the opening. Flawed game. Flawed game. Okay, so takes. Bishop d7. He doesn't even bother with the bishop. He says the bishop looks stupid. If you want to leave it there, great. But if you move it, I'll take your pawn with check. Or I'll play rook takes pawn even, right? So there we go. Now, if the bishop moved here, for instance, Carlsen could play rook takes pawn. And you can't take back because knight takes wins the queen, okay? Right, so here we go. Bishop d7. Knight to d1. He says, where's he going with that? Well, maybe he wants to go to e3 at some stage. But certainly, what he's trying to do is he wants to move his bishop. This is the idea. He moves his knight to d1. He's trying to be a super smart grandmaster. He moves his knight to d1 so he can move his bishop away and start pushing his pawns. Okay? So, and what he's doing is he's challenging Magnus to take the bishop. Boom! Magnus says, I don't care. I've given you a pawn. Now I'm giving you the exchange. I want the black squares, buddy, because that's what the King's Indian's all about. I know how to play the King's Indian. I'm world champion. I'm chess champion of the whole world. He said, you've yet to prove yourself. You're a strong grandmaster, but here I come. And now, queen there, queen to f8, very important move. You must stop f4 at all costs. f4 for white would win the game. So that's how close this game is. This game is almighty close. But this knight is a terrible knight. The bishop is a terrible bishop. It's a hopeless bishop. Look at the pawns, all on white squares, and you've got a white squared bishop. Chess, basic chess gone wrong. Okay, knight e3 is played. He's trying to improve his position. Now the bishop says, look at the power of my bishop. It's stronger than your castle, right? He's got his castle in the corner here. He doesn't want to... He's just sitting there waiting to die. The queen goes on g2. Okay, rook c8, heavy artillery. We're coming through the open file. And I always tell the grasshoppers, grasshoppers, get that open file in games. When you see that open file, often if you're the first person to grab it, you win the game. Because it's all about piece activity. So the open file is challenged, right? Vladimir realises the danger he's in and he wants to secure the position as much as possible. He says, if I can get out of here, I might be all right. Might be all right, buddy, you're dead. He plays c4. He doesn't want him to take the pawn. Maybe he's realised that even if he castles, he's going to be under tremendous pressure. The c pawn, if it fell on c3, Magnus is going to come through with these two pawns. They're going to be raging through here, and the game would be all over because there's no way to attack the black king. So anyway, so Magnus says, well, right, you want to protect your pawn? I'll attack it. What are you going to do about that, buddy? He takes it, en passant, takes back, en passant. What a wonderful move. A French move. I should play the French national anthem. No, queen to g1. Not time for the French national anthem right now. Anyway, so he plays queen to g1. He wants to extricate his queen from the locked-in position. He wants to play king f1 and king to g2 and get his queen out and say, come on, now we can play with the heavy pieces. But Magnus doesn't want to give him time for that. He says, no, I'll play on my terms, thank you, buddy. So he plays king f1. He's following the plan. And now, boom, queen a2. Look at the timing. Look at Magnus' timing. Now, poor old Vladimir can't play king to g2. He can't play it Why can't he play it? Because his bishop would be on pre. His queen takes bishop. So you can't get your king out. What does that mean? That means your queen's got no squares here. Your castle's got no squares. That's covered by a bishop. That's covered by a bishop. There's no moves. And now he comes up with this bright idea, knight to g2 to attack the bishop, to play knight to e1, right? And try to hold his position. So he's trying to hold it together. And now comes a check. And he says, well, what are you going to do about that? He says, well, I'm going to move a knight back onto the back rank. So black has effectively got all white's pieces tied up on the back rank. All right? This is not what Vladimir expected when he started playing this game. He should have thought about this when he played a4, a5, and just wasted pawn moves. And he wasted a rook move and goodness knows what else. And he virtually played right into the mighty attacking Carlsen's game. Okay, queen to b2 is played. Right, knight to g2 is played. Check is played. Well, a knight goes back. What, is white in zugzwang? Well, virtually he can't move a thing. Okay, so the queen goes there. You can't move your bishop. That means you can't move your king. And so what do? Queen e2. It's the only move you've got. And he says, well, right, finish me off. Prove it, prove it. And he moves his king because white's in zugzwang. Rook to g1. He says, well, you can't move your knight because your g-pawn will fall. So he just says, well, right, I'll go for a walk. He plays king f8. Queen to h1. He plays e6. He says, all right, well, I'll find a way to come in and get you. And then he plays rook g3. He says, please take my rook off. He says, I don't want your rook. Your rook is a hunk of garbage. What is the rook? Garbage. The rook is garbage. What is the bishop? Magnus's bishop? Magnificent. It's magnificent. It's a magnificent bishop. The beautiful King's Indian bishop. Okay, so now the position's opening up. So in Australia, we have a term, I don't know whether you use that overseas, but we talk about opening someone up like a can of sardines, right? So you know when you peel back the metal roller on the sardine tin to eat your sardines? Well, this is like opening up the position like a can of sardines. All right, so he plays bishop to f5 and improves the power of the bishop, but at the same time, he stops any ideas of queen g2 and rook takes pawn. Well, now it can't be played. So the queen is basically trapped. He's trapped his queen. So he moves his rook back. Nowhere to go. He's really moving backwards and forwards, waiting for his death. So king to f7. Magnus has achieved another little idea in the position. And now rook g3. He's just marching backwards, forwards, saying, right, well, how are you going to make the breakthrough, buddy? He plays knight d7, and Magnus has got an idea of coming through. So he takes the rook finally, and now the pawn takes. And what happens now? The knight, he doesn't even bother taking the pawn. He doesn't bother. He plays knight e5. What he's really doing is saying again, I have complete domination of the black squares, baby. What are you going to do, right? Okay, so what happens then? Knight e5. And that, my friends, is the end of the game. His opponent resigns. He's almost in total zugzwang. I don't think he can find a way out. So there we go. And that is how Grandmaster Magnus Carlsen moves one step forwards to winning the Sochi World Cup in 2021. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. I'd like to thank chess.com for putting up all the wonderful displays and images and the board which I was able to get hold of here. As you know, I only stream on chess.com only. And so I support chess.com. I'm a chess.com streamer and not an official streamer yet. I'm an affiliate of chess.com, but I hope one day to be a chess.com streamer. And so if you'd like to follow my channel, please be a follower. And if you want to subscribe to my channel, please hit the subscription button and receive free notifications from YouTube, and you'll see more of my videos. Thank you. God bless you all, and bye for now. I'll see you later.